Hi, I'm Debra Prinzing, founder of Still Flower Society, and my privilege to know so many of you and to get to know all the creative work that our members are doing from the field to the vase and everywhere in between. And we are going to have a great presentation. We're going to move kind of quickly because we have 3 presenters. So I see you're all on mute. I think we maybe had to set it up that way because we have, as I said, 3 presenters. So please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. Nisha and I will kind of monitor that and make sure that we get as many questions asked as possible. If you are new to the meetup and this is your first time, I would encourage you to go into the where your name is in the participants column on the right and make sure it says who your first and last name or your farm name, because that's the only way we can identify you for the drawing for some of the giveaways. And Nisha will be collecting all those names and we'll do a drawing probably over the weekend and get in touch with you next week. And then, yeah, just please type your questions in the chat box and we'll get to as many as possible. So let's get started and talk all about diving into dye plants and botanical based pigments for all kinds of applications. I feel like this topic really bubbled up for me when I had several conversations from members who are interested in maybe extending the season on their farm through growing dye plants, and then other members who are in the floral design side of things. In fact, I just interviewed a florist who said at her shop, they keep a big jar on the counter and they throw all their extra petals and clippings into the jar and create like a bath. And every day they have a different color and they just dye whatever lengths of silk ribbon that they have. And it's just something that their customers really get engaged in and want to know about. And they obviously use those ribbons for their hand tie bouquets. So I thought, well, that's something that's pretty low key and doesn't require a lot of technical skill, but there's so much more that is happening among our Slow Flowers members. So I've invited 3 of our members, all doing a sort of different aspects of dye plants, to share what they're doing and give you some inspiration. And we have some giveaways, as I said, so I'm very excited about that. And I think this is the beginning of many other conversations that we'll have. So we're going to dive in. Everybody's going to go for about 10 to 12 minutes, and we've got visuals to show, and we're going to move kind of quickly, and then hopefully we'll have time for questions. Or if the questions pop up in the chat box while someone's presenting, if there's a chance for me to jump in with that question, I will. Let's get started. We're going to start with Elaine Vandiver of 2 businesses, Old Homestead Alpacas, which is her alpaca farm, and Gholson Gardens, which is her cut flower farm. And I just want to show you all the scarf I'm wearing. It's a beautiful alpaca scarf. The knit is amazing. It's this beautiful pattern and the color, and it's the softest, it's cashmere-like. It's the softest thing. I always take this scarf when I travel because it packs small in my purse. And when I'm on an airplane freezing to death, this thing keeps me super warm. And of course, I haven't been on a plane for a year, but I still love to wear it. So Elaine, thank you for your talents on that. Let me just give you a little intro to Elaine. Elaine began Old Homestead Alpacas in Walla Walla, Washington in 2014, where she manufactures a small batch USA-made knitwear line of garments from the alpaca fleece. After discovering natural dyes, she planted her first dye garden in 2015, which allows her to offer hats, scarves, and mittens in every color of the rainbow. With flowers already being cultivated, she expanded to cut flowers in 2017 under the name Gholson Gardens, to help leverage the long lead time of knitwear production. So she'll talk a lot about that kind of dual business. You can find her farm fresh flowers and fibers for sale at local farmers markets in Walla Walla and online. And I will put her website in the chat box. And then I'm going to also show some slides that Elaine has shared. I'll show those while she's speaking. So welcome, Elaine. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Debra, thanks so much for hosting these monthly meetings and for picking a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I'm so excited. Other folks are really excited about this topic too. So as you mentioned in the intro, I came to slow flowers and cut flower production by way of alpacas. So I never planned to have a farm business in the conventional sense, but it just kind of happened, starting first with the alpacas. When we got the first few, I don't know, 7 or 10 of them, we had a couple white ones, a couple light fawn ones, a few brown ones, and some beautiful black ones. And I was having them shorn every year, as we do, and having a line of knitting yarns made from them and spinning fibers and kind of teaching myself the ropes, learning how to knit. Really enjoyed that. And then, I had a kind of a nice little wardrobe of hats and scarves, but they were all, beautiful, but white, brown and black. And so I thought, man, if I could get some more color, that would be really cool. So get on the web trying to find, well, how do you dye? And so I believe the first few things that came up were more of the acid-based commercial dye processes. And so just reading the instructions on handling, using, and disposing of that, I didn't feel super comfortable being able to do it safely here on my farm. And then mainly really a little concerned about the disposal requirements. So I'm pretty rural. I'm on a septic system and we utilize a well. And with grazing animals, so I'm very particular on what goes onto the property. So acid dyes just weren't a good fit for me. And so descended really quickly into the rabbit hole of natural dyeing. And I really wish I could remember the very moment I discovered natural dyeing, but it's been kind of a blur because it just was head first from then on. The whole concept of natural dyeing, like you can get pigment and color from plants and flowers. I just really found that just insane. And that's a picture of all the dye plants that I use on my farm here. So I descended really quickly into that and started growing a little dye garden alongside the alpacas. And I use their manure to fertilize the garden. It's kind of a beautiful little circle there. And yes, like your scarf, Debra, is one of the items in our knitwear collection that we offer. But that's a picture of the natural dye plants that I used this year. And so I thought today I would share a little bit more about how I got to cut flowers and then share a few of my favorite dye plants. So with the alpaca fiber, it takes a full year for the animals to grow the fiber. We only get one shearing a year. And then it takes a better part of another year for it to be commercially milled into yarn, professionally machine knit, and then for me to hand dye and then officially start marketing it. So I had another job at the time and loved farming with the alpacas and the dye plants. But with a 2-year time to market, a little hard to ever consider leaving the day job. And so since I was already growing plants and flowers for dyes, I thought, well, I wonder if I could sell flowers for bouquets as a way to kind of help me leverage the cost of fiber production and cash flow. So I started that in 2017. And it's just been a really beautiful circle for me. So to hear that there's added interest in the slow flowers community about dye plants, I'm like super jazzed. I don't know if you can tell.
That's great.
So I thought I would share 3 of my favorite dye plants because they're what I call twofers. They're great for dyes, and you can also use them in bouquets, or at least I have. So the very first one I thought I would share is Marigold. And I would almost categorize that as a threefer because Marigold has some really great properties to keep away some of the insects in the garden. It's a great cut. It lasts really long. It's got beautiful foliage. And then it makes a beautiful dye. So my hat that I'm wearing is marigold dyed. And then the shawl behind me has a little bit of marigold in it. So you can get these beautiful buttery yellows as well as these classic golden hues from marigold. And it's just, it smells incredible too. And I've seen lots of flower farmers make marigold garlands with it, because that's how I usually store them over the summer as I'm collecting them, as a garland, which makes a beautiful decor, and it's kind of handy. So yeah, marigold, definitely my favorite. It's very easy to germinate, propagate, the whole nine, and it's just beautiful and smells great. My second favorite, and actually part on this slide right here on the right-hand side, is Dyer's Chamomile. You can see it's a dainty, almost daisy-like flower, kind of grown on a spray. Gives me these fantastic yellows, almost neon in some cases. Very fragrant, chamomile like the tea. I store those frozen. I use the foliage in early season bouquets before it buds up. And then during the season, it makes a lovely filler flower as well. So just a beautiful all around color too, smells great and keeps real easy. And then the third one, which is also on this slide, is Coreopsis. It's a golden flower with that red center. I use this in bouquets to add like that twinkly, airy, flowy textural bit. One will open and then it'll fade and another will open. So it's really nice in the vase. And then with Coreopsis, I can get some buttery, orangey hue, as well as copper. This is actually this orange color here. And then the orange cowl I'm wearing today is Coreopsis dyed. And I store those frozen as well, because they're highly prolific. The more you pop those little flowers off, the more they bloom. So I stash them in Ziploc bags and freeze them. And a little goes a long way with the dyes. So those are three of my very, very favorite dye plants that can also be used in bouquets. So that's just a little bit about how I got started using them. And then I thought I would share just a couple little things where I've had folks reaching out to me locally, other fiber artists, fabric artists. I've got a quilter in town that does natural dyeing, and she makes beautiful landscape pictures, arts. So I've been selling all of my excess to local. We've got a knitting and spinning guild. So anything I have left over, they're craving as well. So it's really kind of nice. You can use it for your own stuff in bouquets, and then there is a market for it out there too.
Wow, that's great. We have a few questions. Is this a good time for me to jump in with questions?
Sure.
Or do you have more to say? I don't want to cut you off.
That's all I really have, just an overview.
There's just some amazing responses of people so thrilled about what you're sharing, Elaine. One person asked, do you dye all of your yarn skeins first, or do you dye your knitted garments?
So for the actual yarns for hand knitting, I dye those as skeins. But because the machine knitting operation needs a very exceptionally fine lace weight yarn, it has to be pristine, I do whole garment dyeing, which has kind of been a bit of a learning curve to learn how to get color saturation between the stitches. But because the machines just really require an exceptional level on that yarn, I can't do it, because my setup out in the dye studio is very farmy, very small stock pots. So I do maybe 5 or 6 garments each, that if I had a very fine yarn in there, I'd gum it up in a heartbeat. So
that's really helpful to know. And I've seen that your smaller dye operation when I visited your farm. So I'm imagining when you do have this, large production, you have a vendor that you use to do that.
To do the knitting?
Yeah, no, the knitting, and then also the skein dyeing.
No, I do it all myself.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So we shear in April. I get the fiber back for knitting yarns, usually in late July, early August. I start immediately because I usually have fresh dye stuff. I start immediately. That just becomes part of the day where I'm mordenting one morning and then dyeing the next. And then in the fall, I get my knitwear back. And then it's pretty intense, but it kind of fits in because seasonal fresh cuts are out of season. It's all about the dye. So, yeah.
Someone else asked, is there a specific point in the blooming process that you harvest
Yeah.
these even these 3 varieties you just talked about?
Yep. So that's a great question. It's very different than how you would harvest for flowers for bouquets. You want them almost completely blown out on every variety. So yeah, like I let Marigold almost to the point where it looks like it's going to shatter. I pop the heads off. Coreopsis, usually when it starts blooming, I want to say it's probably mid to late June here for us. It's every day, and then it's twice a day, just to kind of keep it producing. But yeah, I take all of my stuff when it is fully blown out, with the exception of indigo. I don't let that go to seed, but yeah.
It's so interesting because I've had a couple interviews recently with people who are really breaking into growing specifically for dried flowers. And there's a very particular harvest process for that, which is the opposite of letting things blow out. So I feel like with you're not wasting a single flower. Like if you can't sell it in a bouquet, you know how to harvest it for dye, and you have a purpose for that. So probably have very little waste or shrink.
That's correct. I usually do have a surplus though, because I never let anything to chance. I take everything I can get and then share with those who are looking for it as well.
That's cool. All right. A couple more questions, and we're going to move on to our next presenter. Carolyn Kolb says, Elaine, when will you have things back in stock that we can buy? I want everything, all caps.
Thank you, Carolyn. You're so sweet. So I sell primarily online just to my email list. The last 2 years I've sold out just in a couple weeks because I'm at a pretty small production. I think I only had total items last year about 400 between hats, scarves, and mittens. So they come in usually in early fall, and I try to get out there before like the holiday rush. So it'll be probably the end of October, 1st of November is when they'll be available.
So get on Elaine's mailing list to be the first to know. And then I know that we're going to be talking about other plants that are used for colors from Lourdes and Julie, but one question specifically is to ask, how do you get those beautiful baby blue colors on the skein behind you or in your garments?
Very carefully. And I'm not going to say too much about indigo because I think Julie is going to cover that pretty good. And I am a newbie on indigo. It's very particular, in my opinion, on pH and temperature. And I'm not a super particular person, but it's indigo. And I had my first success this year with fresh leaf indigo. So that's where the blues come from.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. And then finally, one more question. I said I was done, but Sue and Kelly from Creekside Growers in Michigan just jumped on, and they're wondering if you ever use the dyes to color dried flowers or to color fresh or dried flowers, which is interesting. And then how do you actually make the dye? Do you use water or oil in your stock pot? And I think Lourdes and Julie are going to talk about some of those recipes too. But have you ever dyed flowers or colored them?
Colored flowers, but
yeah.
You probably could. I haven't particularly tried it yet. And I use a water and a heat-based extraction on my color.
Okay, great. Yeah. And Lourdes says she thinks she can touch on Kelly's question too. Elaine, thank you so much. You rocked. And it wasn't too nerve-wracking, was it?
Just a little.
Okay, we're going to thank Elaine and jump over to our next presenter. I'm so delighted that Lourdes Casanyara-Still of Masagana Farm and Tinta Studio in Manitoba. And I'm going to say, is it Broquerie? Is that how you say your town?
Yeah, La Broquerie. We're kind of like nestled between Town and La Broquerie. Yeah.
Okay, La Broquerie, the French of Canada there. Lourdes is a flower farmer and an artist, and I wanted to just give you a little background about her and then jump to her presentation. Masagana Flower Farm and Tinta Studio is a small-scale flower farm and dye studio and in Manitoba, as I said. Lourdes believes that no matter who and where we are, creating magic and growing joy is right at our fingertips. She advocates for an eco-conscious lifestyle and inspires others to turn their lawns into garden beds. Lourdes grows seasonal blooms and dye plants and makes handmade, small batch, naturally dyed textile goods. She was recently featured on CBC, which is Canadian Broadcasting's Manitoba's dye show called The Icons and the Emerging. She's a recipient of the 2021 Manitoba Craft Council Bursary Fund and is studying natural dyes at Maiwa School of Textiles, and she'll probably talk about that. Lourdes lives with her husband, Kevin, and their 3 cats, Finnegan, Chica, and Solo. We had to get them in there, right? Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Debra, for inviting me. And just like Elaine, I don't think I can hide my enthusiasm in this topic. I might chuckle a bit just because, yeah, like I went to a rabbit hole of like doing natural dyeing as well. Yeah, I'm gonna try to like, I have a script so that I don't get into segue in other topics, because this flower farm has been my baby, and I think it's a culmination of all the things that, since I moved to Canada in 2008, it wasn't a plan thing to own a flower farm, but I'll start with, I used to be a flower buyer for a national wholesaler in Canada, and that was my introduction to flowers. And eventually, so now from flower buyer, I'm now a flower grower. So Masagana Flower Farm, Masagana is a Tagalog term for bountiful, plentiful. So yeah, like I mentioned, I moved to Canada in 2009, started working for as a flower buyer in 2012. I eventually left the job in 2018, and that's when the flower farm was registered as a business. So 2018 was a big year of transition for me. I'm a city slicker. I'm a city girl since I was in the Philippines and then moving to Canada in Manitoba. But I married Kevin, and then he has a property an hour away from the city. And that's when so we got married, and then I left my flower buying job and then started my own operation on only 1,200 square feet of garden space, because, well, we are starting to turn our lawn to garden space. So we transform it like every year. So we didn't take it on, like right away. So, and then I also worked for a flower farm part-time in 2018. It was also like an hour away from me, but I wanted to know if I really want to pursue this flower farming career, like what will entail, because I'm very much a hands-on person to learn. So 2018 as well. Oh my gosh, like for a small space, so 1,200 square feet of flowers, I can't believe how much flowers it produces. So much so that I can only sell so much to my customers, because once they're fully open, I don't want to sell it to them, because it probably just like have 1 or 2 days a flower base, and I don't want them to just have a small short days, when they brought it home. So the house is full with fresh flowers. It's already after giving away a lot, and so is our compost bins. And it didn't really sit well with me, because even though I know once the flowers have broken down, it will feed my garden soil, I'm just like, my flowers only has like one use. I didn't really like that idea. So anyway, same year, 2018, I was trying to learn who are my neighbors, like in the Southeast Manitoba. And then I discovered fiber farms. So I have a neighbor 20 minutes away from me, like 20 minutes north of me. And they also are the only wool mill in Manitoba. So fast forward in 2019, I attended an eco printing workshop in one of these fiber farms. And I guess the rest is history. That was my introduction to natural dyeing. And so I told myself, the succeeding years, so 2019 and 2020, I was like, the flowers, the plants that I'm going to be planting has to meet like at least two of the three categories that I've set for myself. So they should be good as fresh cut, and also hold their shape and color when they're dried, and also as botanical dye source. So 2020 is the year that I made Masagana Flower Farm as a full-time, and it was hard because we only have about like 120 days of growing days, or like frost-free days. So making it as a full-time venture, full-time business is not possible. But yeah, last year I tried indigo, marigold, coreopsis, and cosmos, those bright light cosmos, and scabiosa. And I didn't even plant a whole bed. My beds are like 20 feet long, 3 feet wide. I didn't even plant whole rows of those flowers. And yet, how much flowers I harvested from them to use for natural dyeing is still like incredible. So Tinta Studio, it wasn't in the plan, it was in the drawing board. And when I actually created my website, Tinta Studio was not in the picture, but it just it came out of that passion, like I said, the rabbit hole that I ventured in. And there was so much interest, so I kept making, and then I sold them at my first market when we were able to, and beginning of September. And then I kept making, and I did like online. So I have it online October and all the way in December. And I realized, well, this is what will make my flower farm a year-round venture by diving into natural dyeing. So just to share as well, I'm self-taught at the beginning. So last year I have two of my favorite books. So I got this book in 2018, but I really didn't dive into natural dyeing last year. So it's called The Modern Natural Dyer. It's a really good book for an introduction, and also Harvesting Color by Rebecca Burgess, which is with the Fiber Shed as well. This is really interesting because this book actually, it will have maps for North America, and then it will tell you like, for example, this pokerberry, and so where they are like perennial or growing lots in Americas, and then the color, and then the projects that you can do with the flowers or plants. I'm not a knitter. I'm not a sewer, or I'm not a seamstress either. So I do get my blanks. I call them my blanks, my cotton bandanas and silk scarves from Maiwa, which is a company out in Vancouver. They are amazing. They have a lot of like free resources. So those are my guide when I was like doing all these projects. And only now, the beginning of this year, when I'm really diving into surface designs and more about the natural dyeing by enrolling at Maiwa's School of Textiles. Yeah, so this year, what Masagana Flower Farm would look like, I'm planning on growing more of the dye plants. For sure. So I'm dedicating. So this year we will have 4,800 square feet of our lawn space. So I think we have maximized the lawn space that we would want to turn into garden beds. It's messy right now, but I don't see that. Maybe 3 years ago, I look at it like really messy, because it's like brown right now and stuff like that. But just the potential of it. But I see the potential of it. And in the summer, when it's all lush and green and colorful with all the flowers. So this year I will still be doing garden tours. I love showing people the garden. I will also have like a flower you pick, so meaning people just like book a time, and then they will have like a vase for them, and then they fill it out. But also this like combination of garden tour and you pick, and then turn it into a natural dyeing workshop. It's an experiential workshop at the farm, wherein a small group of people will walk into the garden, tell them what I'm growing, and then what colors they will produce, and then we'll pick the flowers and we'll go back to my soon-to-be studio, and then that's where we'll turn it into a wearable art. Either they can dye a bandana, which is a cotton one, or a silk scarf. Yeah, so in terms of my favorite dye plants, I can't nail it to one or three, but it's just like Elaine, Marigold. Oh my gosh, with the echo printing, just like the design, the petals, how it translates or into the textile, it is beautiful. Coreopsis. Oh yeah, so Coreopsis, I have one example here. This is a dinner napkin, which actually from just like a thrift store, and look how for Coreopsis, not only does the petals but also the stems, so it's kind of like a meadowy look.
Can you just talk about what is the method then of how you actually transfer the Coreopsis to that textile? Can you just touch on that a little bit, Lourdes?
Yeah, so all the textiles have been scoured, meaning clean. So you take out all those like invisible dirts from it. It's just what happens when manufacturing of textile. So scouring, and then for cotton, because it's so hard for the natural dye to actually bind with the fabric, so you have to add another like a mordanting to it so that it will bind in the fabric. All of these that I'm using are safe to dispose into our waterways. Yeah, so just like Elaine, like I was concerned about that, but with Maiwa, all that you can buy from them, their disposing instructions. So this one, the technique is called echo printing or bundle dyeing. So you can actually see it's like the mirror image, right? So I had it wet and then flat on a surface, and I laid the flowers just on one side and then folded it. So I only have flowers on one side and then folded it and bundle it.
Wow.
Yeah,
you're actually getting the whole flower in that design then.
Yeah, including the stems. I bundle it and then tie it and then put it on my pot, which is just simmering. Cotton can hold much heat than silk, but I only go around like 60 degrees Celsius, and then have it in the pot for like 20 minutes. And then I take it out, cool it down a bit, and then I unravel it, and then that's what you get.
So, Lourdes, I have a gallery of photos from your website up on the screen. Can you see those?
Yeah.
Can you just kind of walk people through you've got some scarves, and then the second image on the top left is, I'm guessing, are the bandanas of that same method you just discussed.
Yeah, so well, your face, yeah, so the one that are hanging bandanas, so those kind of like teal one are actually from indigo. I planted indigo as well, like first time, so that's the seedlings that I'm holding in that photo. So easy to germinate. I got them from Grand Prismatic Seed, and I almost had like 100% germination. So the thing with indigo seeds too, you have to watch as they go older. So usually the second, if you have the stash of seed, like second year, the germination does lower. So fresh seeds, you get like a higher germination rate. Yeah, so the flowers, like you've seen that at slow flower movement. So yeah, we have the Bright Lights Cosmos, Coreopsis, Scabiosa as well. The one below that hanging, there are cotton bandanas and then silk scarves. So silk and cotton like take on color like so differently. If you want to dive into it, I would actually suggest to go on silk because it's just very rewarding. You just have like an extra step to prep the cotton. But I find like silk is very love to work with them. So this is actually the first one, the very first silk scarf that I dyed in that eco printing workshop that I mentioned to you guys. And this is like 3 winters now, and this one was modified with iron, but I find that they actually the color because that is one of the questions that I get, like do they fade or anything like that. They don't, but I could they don't fade. And then iron modification actually give it like higher like light fastness and wash fastness. but yeah, so that has been my journey on natural dyeing. It is now it is now like I'm making it like as a whole year business because of the natural dyeing.
Lourdes, that is so fabulous. Can I ask you a couple questions before we move on? One is, by the way, the books and the resources, the websites that Lourdes mentioned are in the chat now. So please take a look at that. And we'll also share that when we send out the replay, the link to the replay video of this session. And we are recording it. The thing that you said that struck me the most when we first had our initial meeting a couple weeks ago with the panelists is that you only have 120 days growing season for your cut flowers. And so to much like the way Elaine saw, cut flowers and alpacas as being kind of creating two cycles that were complementary. I feel like you can talk a little bit about how your season is extended by adding this textile studio to your business.
Yeah, so on my e-commerce side, so being able like to sell this on those lean months, like from September, October until now. So this has been like the source of income for me. We're not going to be like renting out like a farmland. What we have, the space that we have right now is what I will just like be growing with, which is good in itself. But yeah, the income from that can also be like really limiting too. So and what I love also, like Elaine have mentioned this, and you've noticed it, Debra, like kind of like zero waste, because flowers that I don't get to spend, I did buy from this Lee Valley, like a drying rack. So it's an herb drying rack. We have a high ceiling in our house, so it's suspended in our ceiling right now. And so whenever like I probably my compost didn't get much from the garden because I've been just like using them, drying them, and so that's my stash in winter. I also did like the friends that you've mentioned earlier, that they would just have a pot in their flower shop. I did that too. This is just like a mix of like flowers that I know that are good as natural dye and those that are not. And still, like just like the color that you get from it is just fascinating. It's amazing. Wow. That you can really name it. So I name it halo halo, which is actually literal meaning is like mix. It's a dessert from the Philippines that you just have all this like sweet things in it with shaved ice. So that's what I call it as well. And I don't have it right now, but it gives this a kind of like chartreuse color. Oh, I with love this it. Like mix flowers from the garden.
I love that you've brought Tagalog into your business names and your product names, because you really are sharing your character and your heritage, as well as teaching people a little bit about a new language that they probably don't know. So it's really memorable.
And then just like one thing about that Masagana. So Masagana is like this. It's bountiful. That's what it means, bountiful. And for me, then deciding on that, it was like a mindset for me too. Like, what do I have right now with me that I can turn into something, instead of like trying to live like getting the things that I don't have and make something out of it, if that makes sense. So we have the lawn. I mean, I could have chosen not to turn into garden beds.
Right.
But I did. And I thought, because that's what we have right now, and that makes the most of it.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lourdes. Everyone will need to follow you. And Lourdes has donated some bandanas and a scarf for our giveaway to our Canadian attendees. So you might be lucky and get one of those. And I think I'll just jump to our third presenter. So thank you both, Elaine and Lourdes. I'm so excited to welcome our third presenter, Julie Beeler. And Julie is the owner of Bloom and Dye. And I'll tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll jump to Julie's presentation. A designer, artist, educator, and native Oregonian, Julie Beeler grew up with a deep love and curiosity for the natural world. She launched Bloom and Dye on an 18-acre WSDA certified organic property along the White Salmon River in Trout Lake, Washington. Through Bloom and Dye, Julie continues to grow her work and passion to benefit what she values most: curiosity, education, creativity, collaboration, community, and the environment. Educating others on how plants and their colors reflect the beauty of nature is something she's moved to share as a way to inspire, inspire care, stewardship, and impact. Along with her husband, Brad Johnson, Julie founded and led Second Story, an interactive design studio, for 18 years. When she's not digging in the soil, working in her art studio, or leading workshops, Julie teaches creative entrepreneurship in the Applied Craft and Design MFA program at PNCA in Portland, Oregon. So Julie, welcome. And we're so happy to learn from you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, and especially with everyone, Elaine and Lourdes. I just, like them, I'm very enthusiastic and super excited about this opportunity for flower farmers to get engaged with dye plants. It's so wonderful and exciting, and such an incredible opportunity out there. So as Debra said, I launched Bloom and Dye about 5 years ago with this idea that I would create plants, grow them to create work that I could make. And through that process, I thought, well, I also want to do specialty cut flowers. And like Lourdes and Elaine, I knew of very specific dye plants. But what I've learned over time is that there's so many flowers that we're using day to day in, specialty cut floral design and so forth that are amazing dye plants as well. So I thought, well, I could come up with this twofold business model where I'm doing a CSA flower bouquet subscription delivering to our local area. And like Lourdes, I have a little shorter growing season because I'm at 2,000 feet. So it can start the end of March if we're lucky and make it into mid-October, but it's usually April to September. And a lot of the flowers and things that I'm growing, they might not be perfect enough for delivery into bouquets and to other floral designers, but they work great as dyed plants. So in addition to the ones that Lourdes and Elaine mentioned, there's a whole rabbit hole of going down looking at what dahlias can produce and what hollyhocks can produce and rudbeckia and all kinds of things that you can use. And what I get really excited about is that, and why I'm a member of Slow Flower Society, is that if we can come together as a group and try to impact the fast fashion movement and take part in our local fiber sheds, that's so important because we have so much waste. But that waste can be transformed to be made into colors. So here's examples of some of the, rose petals and things that you can dry. And so if you're drying plants, to make dried wreaths and different things like that, you can use them also for color and for dye. The other thing I love to do is educate and teach people about this and kind of expand their horizons and understanding of how they might be working with plants that they're just growing in their yard or other flower farmers. So I teach different workshops here at my studio and at the flower farm, and people can go harvest and make things. Here's a group that was using botanical bundling with natural dyeing and doing shibori techniques to make linen table runners. And then a big part of my motivation was to grow my own color for my own textile work. And this is an example here of using marigold and indigo, which I'll talk about in a second, and bringing those two together and over dyeing and looking at the expansion of color that you can do. And so I work with textiles, and I dye my own embroidery thread and make pieces. And what's really interesting is in the dye world, the traditional dye plants that have been, around for the ages are madder, weld, and indigo. And those plants in and of themselves don't necessarily lend themselves to floral design and so forth. But in combination with other flowers that you might be growing in the garden, you can get some really beautiful, amazing results. And kind of what took me down this whole rabbit hole and this idea that I could grow my own color was my eye-opening experience of kind of learning and foraging for mushrooms, that mushrooms can produce color. And mushrooms can create an amazing rainbow of colors. So I always mention like that rabbit hole started for me not with flowers, but it started with mushrooms. And these are examples of colors that you can get from mushrooms and different fibers I've dyed and so forth. And then some of my textile work of embroidering, and I'm really curious about the natural world and thinking a lot about what's happening below in the soil and the strata and the network of the roots and the systems that are creating this, and like looking at geology and so forth. But I grow probably 24 different types of plants that can be used for dyes in different combinations. And here's some examples of like the black hollyhock or the sulfur cosmos. And you can also take these dyes that you're making and turn them into pigment. And that's what examples on the coffee filters are, is that you can use them as a way to layer color into your work. So there's a whole opportunity to market to artists who are using this as paint and so forth. And then I love doing different tests with bundle dyeing, botanical dyeing. And these are some sample swatches on the left that I did to see what are the petals and what are the flowers producing, and what happens when you dye the fiber and you merge and bring those together. And then here's an example of all the pigments. And making lake pigments is super exciting because, as Lourdes talked about, in order to get the natural dye to bind to the textile, you have to go through this process that we call mordenting. And mordenting is using a natural mineral. It could be something as simple as alum. And that mineral will bind to the fabric, and then the dye will bind to that. And it's all water soluble. So you're working with water-based baths and making these things. But pigment, as we know, is not water soluble. So you go through the process of taking your dye bath and mixing it with the same mineral, that same concept of a mordant. And all of a sudden you've transformed that color into an insoluble pigment that then you can mix with different binders. You can make watercolors, you can make oil, you can make egg tempera. So there's this whole amazing botanical world out there of pigments. And then I really enjoy going around on the property, you know, a lot of the shrubs and woodies and trees and things that we may grow to incorporate into floral arrangements. Those are great for botanical printing, in addition to the flowers. So you're using the whole plant, you know, the leaves and the bark and the berries and all sorts of things. So those are things that I love doing. And I think what I'm most excited about is talking to other flower farmers about how we can extend the life of your flowers. You know, they might be imperfect, like that grasshopper ate your cafe au lait dahlia. Well, that dahlia produces gorgeous colors, and you could dry it or you could freeze it. And then there's opportunities to sell that into other markets. Things that go unsold in the wholesale flower markets. I want to go through and, you know, grab everything that's starting to die and wilt and just pull them and say, there's so much opportunity with dye. Things that get discarded, you know, whether that's arrangements that you may make or for some event, and you think about it, and I'll look at those and it's like 3/4 of it can be saved for dyeing. And then obviously the whole drying is easy to do and it's great. And then you can also freeze plants. So that's really exciting. And I wasn't able to follow the directions. Deborah's like, pick 1, 2, or 3 of your favorite plants.
This is good. People take a screenshot of this.
So I put up, you know, all these ones that I work with and combine and grow, and you'll probably recognize a lot of those on the list as things that you're growing as well. So I think just expanding the opportunities is so exciting, and thinking about our impact and, you know, what we're doing with our farms, because again, I'm in a rural community. I'm concerned about septic. I want to think about my environment. I want to work locally, but really if we can impact something at a larger scale and joining together through these fiber sheds and kind of starting to tackle fast fashion the way Sarah Bellows is at Stony Creek Farms in the South. That's amazing. And the other thing is then we're helping other small businesses because there's a whole world out there for selling where you can sell wholesale. Kathy Hattori up at Botanical Colors and the group out at Maiwa that Lourdes mentioned and others. I was just talking to a young entrepreneur yesterday who's starting up a natural art supply and just wanting to have all these dye plants, like that idea Debra said earlier of, throw the leftover petals in, cook them up. Well, you go buy it bulk, like you do the way, your rice or your herbs or your nuts or, whatever it is. And so you can sell these things bulk. You can also do retail, direct to the consumer through maybe your own means or through some kind of partnership. And then the opportunity for kits and products and getting it into the artists and maker community. And what I think is, amazing. I mean, Elaine's like this incredible poster woman of doing it all from raising the sheep to the plants to then making the goods. But there are a lot of makers and creators out there who aren't doing what Elaine's doing, and you can come together and form these partnerships. And so then I think it's a win-win for everyone, and you're cross-pollinating into different industries. So those are some of the things that get me really excited. And I don't know, I'm happy to answer any questions or touch on any other subjects I didn't touch on.
Yes, we have some questions in the chat box. And Julie, why don't you stop sharing the screen and then we'll ask a few questions. Thank you. Oh my gosh, my head is spinning with all the possibilities you touched on, Julie. Especially that you confided that mushrooms were your point of entry, whereas Lourdes had a different point of entry, and Elaine had alpacas as her point of entry. So there's what I thought was a narrow category is so much broader. And a couple questions that came up. You mentioned mushrooms, and someone else was asking on the chat about lichen and moss. Have you experimented with those?
Yes. So lichen is a great natural dye. Like all things that you forage, we have to be very conscientious and, never take down lichen that's growing its environment. But if it's been blown down, you can collect it. And there's some more rare lichens that you want to be careful with. Was super lucky. I'm kind of in my 9th year of exploring natural dyes and have a community that I work with here that's our little study group. And so we'll study different things. We have never done moss, and I have never heard of moss producing natural dye, but that doesn't mean it doesn't. It very well could. And what's interesting about lichens is there are a lot of, I talked about the mineral mordants that I use, but there are a lot of amazing plant-based mordants, and certain types of lichens are a mordant, and then certain types of mushrooms also have mordanting properties with them. So it's just kind of exciting to get into like the nerdy science of it and start to learn a little more.
Wow. Oh, wow. I'm ready to sign up. I think that the phrase of the day is rabbit hole, and which is very funny. Yes. Julie, you've donated a dye kit. Can you just briefly talk about what is that? How do people use that? And also how they can order one if they're not the winner?
Yes. So it's a beautiful scarf that is a silk scarf, and it's a blank like Lourdes talked about. And I have actually scoured and mordanted it so that you don't have to do that. And then it comes with a whole variety of different dye plants. So we've got the marigolds and the scabiosa, the hollyhocks, sulfur cosmos, chamomile, coreopsis, all of those here. And then it comes with just the basic little information that explains what's in the kit and what flowers. And then there's some instructions on my website at bloomandye.com/journal. And what that does is it walks you through a couple of different things you can do. You can do a botanical bundle like Lourdes demonstrated, and that would be an example here of some little botanical bundle. But you can And here's some other examples of things you can do, of bundling these petals. But you could also, if you wanted, you could just take out the black hollyhocks and put them in some water and then soak them and make these wonderful purple colors. So you can make them into dyes or botanical bundling. They're set up for either. So this is the little kit and kind of.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah.
And so people can also order that from you at your website. And I just put your website in the chat box. Maybe I'll ask Lourdes and Elaine to also turn on their mics again. And all three of you could just briefly talk about how people can learn more from you or plug in. Julie, since you're on the screen, I'll let you start, and then we'll go to Lourdes and Elaine.
Yeah, I would be happy. Anyone can reach me through Bloom and Dye. I've got my email up there, and then also on Instagram. And I'd be happy to chat with anyone or hop on a call to talk about kind of your unique situation, what you're looking at doing, and how you can start to sell some of these dye plants that you're growing. And then I also teach different workshops, and I'm going to be launching in May a whole series of online. So could join that way. And yeah,
wonderful. I'm
just super excited to help anyone who wants to go down this path. The more we can do it and the more of us that come together, the better it's going to be.
That's awesome. Thank you. Oh my gosh, this has been so lovely. Lourdes, can you just talk a little bit about how people can plug in with you and your workshops online or in person?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. That's where all the beautiful photos that I constantly update my page, Masagana Flower Farm, and also Tinta Studio. I will have, I'm be joining an online market next month, Petit Magasin, April 24th, 25th. So I'm saving my stash and all that I'm doing in our living room right now for that market. And also for the workshop, I will be launching a dye kit sometime mid summer to fall, and there will be a video instructions on that as well. I'm partnering with the fiber farm this year. They haven't made the announcement, so I can't say who that is, but they're doing a fiber school, so it's an experiential the whole system of growing your fiber and then dyeing with it, and that those workshops will be available online too. So to know when that's happening, I have a subscription as well that you can join through my website, but following Instagram will get you to know the things that I'm doing in this growing season.
So sign up for that mailing list or follow Lourdes on Instagram. Thanks. Miss Elaine.
Hi. You can find me at oldhomesteadalpacas.com or gholsongardens.com, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook with both of those names as well too. I mostly reach out via my newsletter, but I do post pictures online as well too. So
wonderful. That's great. Thank you all so much. It is an opportunity that Julie and Lourdes and Elaine have opened our eyes to. So what a wonderful morning. We do have some giveaways. As I mentioned, we have the dye kit that Julie's donated, so someone will receive that. We have all of the bandanas and scarf from Masagana. And I just wanted to show this. This is a book called Natural Palettes that came out last year. I happen to have a review copy. It's wicked thick. Look at that. But it's basically by a textile artist named Sasha Dorr, who is very well known. And she just created color palettes in the book from different plant-based resources. So someone will receive that. Last month, we had a lot of giveaways. I just want to give a shout out to Pam Youngsman of Poppy Starts. Thank her. She's a member. Thank her for donating 4 amazing hellebore plants. Those went to Rose Kocher of Green Center, Lori Hines of A Bloom, Lori Garza of Flurry, and Dee Hall of Shiptown Botanical. We had a book called A Tapestry Garden, which had a lot of hellebore design ideas and growing ideas in it. And that went to Liz Marcellus. And then Fawn Ruckert and Julie Ross received the Johnny's seed packets. So we like to share the love here. And it's just a little thank you for all of you who took the time to join us today. You might get lucky and receive a prize. Next month, we are going to gather together on Friday, the second Friday of April, which is Friday, April 9th. And Nisha has challenged me to change it up. So we're going to do the meetup as an Instagram live. Do you want to say anything else about that, Nisha? We'll, of course, share all the details when we have them.
Yeah, I mean, instead of doing Zoom, you can just find us on our Instagram on Slow Flower Society, and we'll be there.
Okay, and we're hoping to have it be a topic with two of our members who are going to answer a lot of questions and sort of bring us up to speed on the world of sustainable floristry and sustainable floral design, and all of the moving parts that factor into that larger category of our world in slow flowers. So I'm excited to have that be the topic, and we will, as I said, share the video of this because everyone will want to watch it again and take notes. And I thank our presenters. This has been a beautiful day, and I am going to go order as many marigold seeds as I can find because I know I can grow those and have some fun with making some color from that. Thanks so much.